Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday, April the 18th in the year of Donald Trump. So we have a jam-packed show for you today, and I'm not sure if you're all able to see it. We are producer Robbie-less today. Robbie is at his normal day job, and I've got to check the Rumble room.
I'll check that. Don't worry. Just keep going.
All right, I'm looking to see if you guys are able to see this. So you guys feel free to comment in the Rumble chat if you are hearing me at all. If not, this is going live right now on YouTube, and we are trying to fix some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Okay. Ted says it's there. All right. So you guys let us know.
I'm not 100% sure yet because I want to look at it the way that the
viewer is watching.
The peeps view it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Rumble room. So in case you missed it, this is the Ted Manila Information Show, or TMI for short, where we bring you way too much information. That over there is the T, Ted Rall. I am the M, Manila Chan.
I still have something to do over here.
Thank you for tuning in.
Ooh, I think we're good now.
Vintage says we are being seen and heard. I feel seen and heard.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. In the Rumble room. Okay. There we are.
Mm-hmm.
There we are. Okay. We needed confirmation, and we have a very, very good Rumble room chatters in there. So thank you guys for helping us with that to make sure that you guys are able to see this whole thing. Of course, we're live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And because we're live, you just never know. Technology fails, human error, anything can happen.
In this case, Ted error.
Ted error. I don't know if do you not fall into the human error category?
No, not at all.
It's a Ted error. So make sure you guys hit the like button, the follow button, and all of that good stuff so you can support little indie channels like this. We are still continuing to try to grow this little channel. We're the little channel that could, I hope. And it's a Good Friday, by the way, Ted, for all those celebrating out there.
By the way, I have to, as someone who served Mass, I grew up Catholic and all that. And, I've never understood why it was called Good Friday. I mean, it's the Friday when Jesus was killed.
I know.
So literally, what's so great about having a bunch of nails driven through your hands and feet,
right?
And hung up to suffocate for hours in the blazing sun at Golgotha? That sucks, man. And having a Roman asshole poke your ribs so that you bleed out faster, and he's there to help. I mean,
I know.
And they're fighting over your clothes and everything. It's a bad scene there in Golgotha.
It's Good Friday. I don't know. I never understood.
Why is it Good Friday? What's so good about it? If you're Christian,
the ontological, decision to make this.
If you're anti-Christian, it's a Good Friday. It's like, take that, Jesus. Fuck you.
Maybe the Romans named it, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, maybe. Except the Romans then, Christianized, so they converted to Christianity in 310 AD, I believe it was.
That I don't know. I think the idea, though, behind the name Good Friday, and again, I'm no ontological expert of any sort of anything, but I think it's that the understanding that Jesus's death was a sacrifice for the sins of humanity, and it offered salvation and hope and whatever. That was his good unto people. I think. I'm not sure, but that's.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to look up while you bring in the intro. Why is it called Good Friday?
Why would you name it that? When
it just seems honestly, it's just sort of like cruel. What a cruel joke. I mean.
Yeah, I don't know. But as you look that up, I'll get the ball rolling here.
It's according to AI. It's an obsolete meaning of the word good. Which means holy or pious, and nobody uses it anymore. But so it's like, it's a Holy Friday, it used to be a synonym. So that's why.
Oh,
it should probably honestly. I think Holy Friday
makes more sense.
It makes more sense. It sounds better. I'm proposing as America's foremost leading expert on Christianity, that we rename.
Yes.
Right here and now, I've decided that we're going to rename it Holy Friday. Happy Holy Friday, everyone.
As two non-practicing Catholics, or maybe I don't know if you call yourself former, but Ted, I'm with you on that.
I still consider myself Catholic because
I do too,
because of the cultural component. I consider myself very culturally Catholic. Like, for example, I believe in penance. Like, for example, if you screw up, which we all do, you should try to fix it if you can. And, that Protestants don't care about that. They're like,
yes.
Trump's a Protestant. We sent you to,
right.
We shouldn't have deported you, and we sent you to an El Salvadorian prison.
Yeah.
Sucks to be you. Catholics don't look at it that way.
We have that Catholic guilt.
A Catholic would be like, nah, you got to make it right. He's still alive.
Catholic guilt.
Yeah.
It's the whole Catholic guilt thing. Me too. And on top
Catholic
of that,
guilt is a positive thing, by the way.
I'm going to one up you, Ted. I've got the Asian guilt too.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That there's an extra one-upping there.
I guess if you were Jewish, you'd have the trifecta.
Oh, man. Well, I almost converted to had married, for
really
marriage
me too.
Purposes.
Wait, is your husband
marriage
Jewish?
Purposes? No. For not this previous
previous husband.
No, previous relationship. And then I ultimately chose. I didn't.
Yeah, me too. In college, I was thinking about converting to Judaism too. Because I like Judaism. I think I was dating a Jewish girl, and we were very serious, and she was very serious about her faith, and so I looked into it, and I was like, there's a lot to like, really. Yeah,
I thought the same thing. I thought, well, I'm not really a practicing Catholic. It means more to him. Religion means more to him than it meant to me. So, we were very serious talking about getting married, and he was an only child, and it meant a lot to his family that. The grand, like an Ivanka, right?
Did anybody make jokes like, funny, you don't look Jewish?
I never converted, so it didn't happen. So,
right.
So here we are. So here I am as a non-practicing Catholic on a Holy Friday. So Holy Friday to you, Ted. So I'm
That's
with
right.
you on that.
Does that sound better? It's better.
It
I mean,
it does.
I've just
like Ash Wednesday makes sense.
Hundreds of years of screw ups.
Ted, we call it Ash Wednesday.
Well, that makes sense.
It makes sense. Right. Because there's like the ashes on your forehead. It makes sense.
It makes sense.
But I used to question this all the time as a kid. I'm like, why are they calling
I also had a problem with the whole
Jesus
3-day thing. I mean, I understand how it worked, but like he rose on the third day, right? But I was like, but wait, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's really only 2 lapsed days.
And
I was like, it's too, how does that work? Yeah.
We're so annoying. I thought the same thing. I was like, you don't count the first day. You count the next day as day one. Like
it's
24 hours.
Yeah, he was only dead 48 hours. I mean, come on.
Right. So I used to like hang on those little nuances and be annoyed. But that's what makes us good and thorough journalists, Ted.
That's true.
Because you're like, well, why is this? Why?
Well, it's sort of like when they say, "Oh, he created the earth in the earth and the heavens in 7 days." No, he didn't. He created it in 6 days, and then he chilled on the 7th day.
He chilled on the 7th, right? So technically, you've been saying this wrong. I get what you're saying, but it's
wrong. Yeah.
Technically wrong. No, I agree.
And then there's other stuff I never really cared that much about.
Blasphemous
when they said Moses died when he was over 1,000 years old, but I'm like, kind of like, this is a translation issue. Has to be. Yeah,
it has to be. We're being blasphemous. Let's stop there.
I don't think we're being blasphemous.
We got to get through the news.
We're basically Jesuits, is what we are. Okay.
I don't know if people are going to be agreeing with us on any of.
I don't care.
But all right, yes. Since when do we care? All right, let's hit the jaws and get to the news. And we got to hear from our illustrious Secretary of State in this.
Oh yeah, right. Okay.
Story.
All right, here we go. Trump will walk away from trying to broker. Sorry about that. A deal between Russia and Ukraine within days, unless there are clear signs that a deal can get done. That, according to Marco Rubio.
And here be the Marco Rubio.
I think it's important to remind everybody that the Ukraine war is a terrible thing, but it's not our war. We didn't start it. The United States has been helping Ukraine over the last 3 years, and we want it to end. And so we've talked about outlines of both sides. I thought we had positive meetings yesterday. Obviously, the Ukrainians have to go back home. They have to run it by their president. They have to take into account, their views on all of this, and we hope to hear back from them very soon. This is important, but there are a lot of other really important things going on that deserve just as much, if not more, attention. What we're talking about here is avoiding thousands and thousands of people from dying over the next year. We're trying to avoid that. So if they're serious about peace, either side or both, we want to help. If it's not going to happen, then we're just going to move on.
Move on, Ted.
By the way, talk about contradictory. He's like, it's not that important. Thousands of people will die in the next year. Not that important. There's more important things.
Just going to move on.
I'm like, what's more important? Seriously, are tariffs more important than thousands of people are going to die in the next year? Not to me. Yeah. I mean, thousands of people are more important than higher prices. But, whatever, psycho. All right, so Marco Rubio, the most annoying man in the world. Anyway, there was no immediate comment from Paris, London, Berlin, Kiev, or Clovis on Rubio's statement. 3 European diplomatic sources told Reuters that Rubio's comments reflect growing frustration in the White House over Russian intransigence to end the war, although that's not how I read Rubio's comments. Sounded like he was having some problems with the Ukrainians. At least also. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said some progress on a peace settlement had been made, but contacts with Washington are hard. He said that Russia is trying to resolve the conflict, but also trying to ensure its own interests, of course. Moscow says it remains open to dialogue with the U.S. Rubio's threats come amid signs of some progress in U.S. talks with Ukraine. Trump said yesterday he expects to sign a minerals deal with Kiev next week, after an attempt in February fell apart following, of course, that disastrous visit to the White House by Zelensky with J.D. Vance.
It was an epic visit.
Totally epic. The talks in Paris were the first that happened yesterday, were the first substantive, high-level, in-person talks on Trump's peace attempt that have actually included the Europeans. I think that's the problem. The Europeans don't want any peace agreement here.
Right.
They shouldn't be involved. Rubio said that a peace framework that he presented received an encouraging reception. Zelensky called the talks constructive and positive. It's unclear why Rubio's tone shifted so dramatically overnight. Well, obviously Trump told him to say all that. That's the Trump. You can hear the Trump voice through what Rubio is saying there. Still, his comments on Friday underlined mounting frustrations in the White House over not enough progress in order to try to settle this growing list of geopolitical challenges. Rubio said he talked to Sergei Lavrov after the talks in Paris, briefed him on some of the elements of the U.S. peace framework. Putin says he wants Ukraine to not join NATO, Russia to control the 4 Ukrainian regions that it currently has, and for a limit on the size of the Ukrainian army. Kiev says those demands are tantamount to capitulation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what happens when you lose.
I bet the Russians would probably be willing to let go the limitation on the size of the Ukrainian army, but they have to have the no NATO thing, and they have to have the territory they control. Kiev said those demands are So Rubio says the Euros had a central role to play in any peace pact, especially since there's Russia sanctions over which Washington has no control, would need to be lifted in order to secure an accord. I mean, it's true that there's a lot of moving parts here. And I mean, the way I look at it is, the Ukrainians don't seem to be willing to really make any substantive accommodations. The Russians are, I think it's a problem for the administration, are moving slowly and cautiously. And the Europeans are just throwing a stick into the spokes of the bike here and don't want anything to happen. So, I mean, the way here, we know that, of course, the president watches the TMI show every morning. So thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure. And so here's my advice to you, Mr. President. Just basically for now, you are going to have to talk to the Europeans. But first, get a deal between Russia and Ukraine. Basically, no NATO. Russia keeps what it has. You might have a little bit of land swap type situation. Both sides, Ukraine can join the EU. Maybe don't have that limitation on the size of the army. Get that done. then go to the Europeans and say, listen, if you guys don't lift sanctions, this thing is just going to keep going, and then it's all on you because we're pulling out, and you're going to have to support the Ukrainians, and then that's it. I'm not saying this is easy. I think if it works, that's the way it works. That's how it has to go down.
My read on this, real quick, before we get to the next story, is that I think there's a lot of JD Vance in here, and JD Vance has an axe to grind after that epic meltdown that Zelensky had in the Oval. And I think JD Vance is in the president's ear. And maybe I'm just projecting my hopes here, is that we've known all along Russia has not changed its demands at all in 3 years. No. They haven't budged one bit. Everything they've said remains true to this day, 3+ years into this whole thing. So if I were,
the Russians could have, given that their improved position on the battlefield, they could have become more aggressive and asked for more. And they
could. And that's my point, is that they have been steadfast in their demands. Not one thing has been flip-flopped. Whereas on the Ukrainian side, the losing side, you do have to capitulate if you want it to end. That's the whole point of this, is if you are the loser, you don't get to dictate terms. It's awfully kind, I would say, that the Russians are even considering having a conversation or dialogue at all.
They don't need to, really.
They don't need to. They'll just keep grinding it out for the X amount of years, and that is that. But Zelensky, on the other hand, has flip-flopped back and forth. And I think, and maybe I'm projecting here, but I think what Marco Rubio said reflects the administration's desire to wash their hands of this thing and dump this in the lap of the Europeans. That the U.S. is like, I don't want to throw good money after bad. I'm over it. We're out. That's my read.
There's no question.
Could be wrong. I could just be projecting my hopes.
I think that's right. And I mean, I do think it's, look, it's kind of like the administration is, they're the middlemen, they're brokers, and they need to knock both two heads together. It's like, listen, you two rascals, right, you guys need to make peace. Look, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for all the sides here. It's an opportunity for Ukraine to stop, getting bombed and destroyed. It's an opportunity for and to get peace and start rebuilding their economy. It's and join the EU, and that'll improve their economy. It's an opportunity for the Russians to also get rid of sanctions, bring their troops home, secure their border. It's an opportunity they're not likely to have under a President Buttigieg or a President Newsom or even a President Vance. So I would say they should hop on top of it.
Yeah. I think
Trump is a terrible president, but he's really like a unique figure in this particular issue. I mean, he's the best possible in this system. He's the best person you're going to get. So,
for this issue.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, so let's keep going. At least 2 people have been killed, 6 others wounded at Florida State's Tallahassee campus yesterday after a student who was the son of a sheriff's deputy opened fire near the student union. The 2 people killed were not students. The motive is still unknown. The suspect is 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner, member of the Sheriff's Office Youth Advisory Council, whose mom is a Leon County Sheriff's deputy. He was apprehended after being shot by cops. He's hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries as of this writing. The suspect was carrying a shotgun and a handgun, the latter of which was purchased by his mom for personal use. University officials have canceled all classes and campus activities through the weekend. This is the second mass shooting at FSU since 2014, when a 31-year-old guy shot and wounded 3 people, 2 students and a library employee at a university library. He was later shot and killed by the police because, they didn't give him the non-life-threatening injury because he wasn't related to the cops. So that's how that works there.
Oh, I didn't even think about that this boy survived only because the people that showed up were like, hey, isn't that little Phoenix?
That's Mary's son. Oh, okay.
Hey,
shoot him in the leg.
Right. Shoot him in the foot. Just he's a bad shot. No, I don't know. It's a sad story, obviously. we still don't know, Ted. 24 hours later, we still don't know what was behind it, the motivation, but this, I would say, tragically or not tragically, depending on how you look at it, this happened just as Florida outlawed the open carry or conceal. I forget what their laws are down there, but they've outlawed the carrying, the concealed carry that was once available. Well, I'll just go with concealed carry.
Wait, so you're not allowed to concealed carry in Florida anymore?
Right, and not on college campuses. But up until I think very recently, like a month ago or something, you were still able to carry them onto campus.
So it makes your teacher think twice when she's trying to decide between that B+ and that A-.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
I don't know. So I don't remember what the exact law is in Florida, but I know that there was a carry, either concealed or open carry, that was allowed, and now it's not allowed, and that's what people in Florida are talking about now, is like, well, if some of the kids were armed, this wouldn't have ever happened. I don't know.
Yeah, the thing about that argument is that it almost never happens. I mean, it's like there was some case like fairly recently where it did happen, where a good guy with a gun stopped a bad guy with a gun.
Yeah,
but it was news because it almost never happens. Right?
It does happen, but it's not the normal.
Well, it's just, because here's the thing, right? So, and I'm not anti-gun at all, as you know. But the thing is that when in a situation like this, the shooter always has the advantage of surprise. I mean, imagine if, like, let's say you're, think about, like, say, bank security guards. I mean, they're armed, they're trained, they're there to guard the bank from bank robbers, and yet more often than not, in a real violent bank robbery, they're either killed or they're taken captive.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're there all day long. 99% of the
element
time,
of surprise.
Nothing happens, right? You're bored, and it's like, so, they're going to get the drop on you because you can't stay in a state of elevated, like waiting there, like ready to go at a second.
Arm on your,
we're not
your
cat, like how like a cat is ready to go from 0 to 60 all the time, from like a dead sleep. But we're not like that. That's just not the way our brains are wired. So it's like, that's why I think it's kind of like it's just a dumb argument. You can, I don't know about. I'm really I'm agnostic about concealed carry, but I don't think it's going to, if the argument is that it's going to save lives, I don't really think that's true.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's for your own personal. I don't know. I'm pro second, pro 2A, and
I almost prefer concealed carry to open carry, to be honest.
Well, we have open carry in Virginia.
I don't like open carry. Like, you go to Starbucks and some dude's got like a Glock on his hanging off his belt.
Yeah, it looks scary, but I've lived in two states now. I've lived in two states now that open carry is a thing, Arizona and Virginia, and it takes some getting used to, but after a little while, it's not as jarring. But that's me coming from California, right? Where as far as I knew, only the bad guys had the guns, and those were the gangbangers. So, once you kind of get used to the physicality of seeing it, walking through Walmart, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is just normal. Okay. Anyway, let's move on real quickly. Couple more stories. Probably not a whole lot of comment time, Ted.
Yeah, that's probably true. All right, let's keep going here. A federal judge ruled yesterday that Google has violated antitrust law by illegally dominating online ad markets with its technology. The decision paves the way for U.S. prosecutors to try to break up the $1.8 trillion company. The court found that Google unlawfully monopolized two parts of the online ad market: publisher tools and software connecting those publishers to advertisers. Google did this by forcing publishers to use both products together, making it hard for rivals to compete. A second hearing will determine what Google has to do to restore competition. The ruling comes after a judge in a separate case back in August said Google illegally dominated online search and text ads Also, the remedy in this case still needs to be determined, but though the government wants Google to divest Chrome, the web browser. In other news, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, parent company of Facebook, and former COO Sheryl Sandberg testified this week in an antitrust trial about whether the Facebook owner monopolized personal social networking services by buying Instagram and WhatsApp in 2012 and 2014.
My only
also,
comment, break them up. Break them up. That's all I got to say. Break them up.
Although it doesn't, it didn't really do much good with AT&T when they broke them up. Nothing really happened.
Well, then they shouldn't be opposed to it.
All right.
Precedent shows.
The suspected arsonist who allegedly set fire to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's crib over the weekend apparently admitted to 911 that he went after Shapiro because of what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. The suspect, and I just want to say for the record here, that even if Shapiro's house had burned down to the ground, that would not really be that severe compared to what the bombs that he signed were used against the people in Gaza. Anyway, the suspect is Harrisburg resident Cody Balmer, 38 years old. He's been charged with domestic terrorism, which is ridiculous, aggravated arson, attempted criminal homicide, and prowling at night, among others.
That's weird.
I wonder if he ran into J.D. Vance while he was doing that. The suspect was arrested on Sunday after he turned himself over to state police and said, "Yeah, that was me. I set the blaze." Balmer told the operator who he was and said he wanted the governor to know that he will not take part in his plans for what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. "You all know where to find me. I'm not hiding, and I will confess to everything that I had done," he added. Pennsylvania state cops also confirmed in the warrant that the alleged arsonist, targeted Shapiro based upon perceived injustices to the people of Palestine and the Democratic governor's Jewish faith. That awkward. The attack occurred hours after Shapiro hosted a Passover feast. Shapiro and his family were home at the time, but no one was injured. He did look kind of like a crazy man. I hate it when a crazy man has the right politics, but he's crazy.
Yeah, he looks a certain way. That's for sure.
Looks a certain way.
He looks a certain way. It's you can tell, Ted. Sometimes by looking in the eyes.
The cray is strong with this one.
You can just tell right there. It's not that they're vacant when you look in the eyes like a dementia patient.
No, it's not like that.
It's something else.
It's wild eyes.
There. It's crazy eyes. It's
crazy eyes. A little methy, I would say.
Yes, I thought that too. He looks really rough for a 38-year-old.
Definitely. Yes, he's been sleeping hard, it looks like.
Ooh,
yeah.
It's
been also, he really needs to, I want to get him in touch with some hair care products at the prison commissary.
But he doesn't have hair. He has a long
the strings of like random, he looked like he'd been hanging out at the radioactive plant.
Oh, he was like
Chernobyl worker.
Well,
Jinx. All right,
it's rough. It's rough.
And finally,
do we have? Can you double check on Rumble if we're due for an ad?
I'll
double. Can.
Let me take
you check that. I'll read this one because this is our prep story here. All right. So last summer, it was reported that billionaire Elon Musk had at least 12 children. Since then, the world has learned that Musk officially has at least 2 other children, bringing the grand known total to 14. However, according to new reports, there could be more, as the unhinged oligarch has reportedly been known to send his semen to women he doesn't even know. A new Wall Street Journal investigation reveals claims made by another.
Do that? I do that all the time. Hey, have some jizz.
A new Wall Street Journal investigation reveals claims made by another supposed Musk baby mama, the right-wing influencer Ashley St. Clair. She recently had a child that she says belongs to Musk. She's joining an increasingly long line of women who have made the inscrutable decision to bear the billionaire's spawn.
Oh, it's scrutable. It's highly scrutable. I see the scrutosity all over the place.
That list already includes Musk's first wife, Justine Musk, who kept the name, with whom Tesla CEO is said to have had 6 children. Then he was dating Grimes. Her real name is Claire Boucher. They have 3 children, including little X that he totes around to the White House with him. It was the kid that was, you see him all over the place in Washington, D.C. That's the kid, for whatever reason, he's just always with Elon Musk. And Siobhan Zillis, the other baby mama, is a Musk employee engineer at the brain chip company at Neuralink. They have 4 children. St. Clair apparently has a lot of tea to spill. Much of it is backed up by texts from Elon and other documentation, according to the Journal. She's only 26, this influencer, and then there's also this apparent he allegedly tried to get this lady, Tiffany Fong, another influencer. He's like trying to go after influencers to have his babies, which is, that in and of itself is strange.
Well, it's strange because it's like, okay, so influencers by definition have an average IQ of about 26. And so,
which is weird.
So like, why would you want to, Elon Musk is a smart guy. Why would you want to dilute his IQ to that point by breeding? This goes against all eugenics. His
pro-neonatalist position on this is that he thinks the world is populated by too many dumb people, so he wants to share his sperm.
Yeah, but these are dumb people who should not reproduce.
Right? I don't, this Neuralink engineer, maybe she's very smart. Obviously, she's an engineer. She's got to be pretty smart. But outside of that, this is very strange. I'm going to leave the story at that because it's Good Friday. It's Holy Friday, Ted. I don't.
Well, and this is the unholy part of Friday here.
Friday.
What's funny though, it is. Musk aside, right? He has what, 10 kids? Is that the deal?
No, 14.
Okay, well, so listen, we now consider that completely outlandish, and he had them with numerous moms, right? 4, 5?
A lot of baby mamas.
Okay,
but we don't even know how many.
But seriously, there was a family that I grew up with in Kettering, Ohio. They had 14 kids from one mom.
My word!
My father-in-law was like the youngest of 16 kids from the same mom. Okay, in Taiwan. It wasn't that okay. When I was a kid, having say 6 kids, not at all crazy.
Yeah,
I would say
my mom's one of 7.
Generically, most kids I knew had 3 or 4 siblings,
sure.
And now that's unusual. And the idea that you would have like over 10 is like, are you kidding me? And that used to be sort of like on the high end of average when we were kids. Well, when I was a kid. So it's just interesting how, in the West, the birth rate has collapsed to the point where this is considered a major news story.
Yeah, but I think
also he has terrible taste in women.
Justine,
his wife Justine
doing this
is kind of cute.
His first wife.
Yeah, she's a Canadian, I think, novelist of some sort.
Or some, I don't know.
But
they met in college. But so I think people aren't creeped out about that because it was done in the traditional sense. Mm-hmm. Now that you're mailing out your baby batter to people, that's
your spunk, your spooge, your jizz, your
and
jism.
Very weird. So,
all
right, we'll leave it at that. Are we up for an ad, Ted?
We are up for ads, but we are adless today.
Oh, we are adless right now. Okay.
Right.
So with that, I'm gonna leave that Elon baby batter story alone.
By the way, one little quick thing. Just want to mention there are reports coming in that ICE is now conducting searches on land. They stopped near Robbie's neck of the woods, I think it was, in Montana. They stopped an Amtrak train and searched all the old people on board and demanded proof of citizenship. They were in Kevlar and carrying long rifles as they went from car to car.
That's
not unlike, members of the SS during World War II.
Very, what? I don't get it. All right. With that, let's switch gears and get to our main topic with our guest who's been hanging out in the virtual green room.
Is writer and scholar KJ Noh. He has expertise in Asian Pacific affairs. He's a researcher and activist and a contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator. China's economy grew faster than expected in the first quarter of this year, expanding at an annual rate of 5.4%. I thought they were in the middle of a recession or depression, they had been telling us. That's 0.3% above forecasts, driven by strong consumer spending and industrial output. That was probably fueled by consumers and businesses trying to buy stuff ahead of Trump's trade war. Analysts say the momentum may or may not last. Tariffs against China by the U.S. are now 145%. Beijing has retaliated with 125% against the U.S. And that's a problem for an export-dependent economy like China's, where $1 trillion trade surplus offsets weak consumer demand. A sluggish real estate sector and deflation. The U.S. is by far China's largest single export market. China's annual growth is now projected to grow to 4.5% later over this year. That, according to a Reuters poll of economic analysts, that's below the government's target of about 5% by a little bit. China says that they're ready. However, they say that even though the economy will be a little dinged, China's been preparing for this sort of thing for a long time. They call it decoupling from the U.S. The officials over there say that they're ready to roll out strategies to boost domestic demand, like, hey, we don't have to sell to the U.S., we can sell to us, and shift trade toward alternative markets. In March, exports to Southeast Asia went up 8% on a year-to-year basis. Shipments to Africa, 11%. Exports to India, 14%. So it's not like the Chinese are in that much trouble. KJ, thanks for joining us. Very quick, my first question to you is, what is the impact of the declining dollar on all this?
Well, I think it remains to be seen. I mean, ideally, this would make the U.S. more competitive in markets, so there would be an increase of U.S. exports. But the problem is what Trump is doing right now, not only with tariffs, but now also port fees, is just completely disrupting the entire global trade system. As one expert said, it's like nuclear winter right now. It's essentially, it's the monkey with a straight razor. You don't know what's going to happen next, but everybody's scared.
Nothing good.
Nothing good. You mentioned school shootings earlier, or public shootings. It's a little bit like that. Everybody's running, ducking for cover, and they don't know where to go to. The stock market is not safe. The bond market is not safe. Foreign exchange is not safe. Nobody knows what is happening next. All we know is that we need to, buckle in, hide, and see if we can weather the storm. And hopefully some of the better angels will, appear.
Yeah. And KJ, given the latest round of reciprocal tariffs between the U.S. and China, how do you see this impacting BRICS? Because I feel like this could be a boon moment for the group.
Yes, I think it will definitely strengthen BRICS, as well as other regional blocs such as ASEAN. Earlier you said that China is extremely export dependent, but that's actually not the case. It was 20 years ago, but currently it is less export dependent than the global average. Just one example, it exports about 15. U.S. exports are about 15% of China's economy, and trade with the U.S. is about 3% of China's GDP. It contributes 3% to China's GDP. And that's not a lot. I mean, the city of Shanghai contributes more to China's GDP than the entirety of the trade with the United States. So China is not worried about that. They're actually doing quite well. Their stock market is doing well. And also you can see their recent productivity figures are, quite robust. So how does this affect BRICS? How does it affect other, multinational, multilateral trading blocs? It will strengthen them, because simply the US is creating an incentive for countries to trade with each other outside of the circuit of the United States. The US, by imposing tariffs on the entire world, has simply erected a wall around itself. And that is utter foolishness.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment for sure, because if Trump's whole idea of being a businessman right, is that you see the rise of China over the last 30 years. It's undeniable that the growth is there. And every time the so-called financial experts predict doom and gloom for China, every quarter they end up outperforming expectations. We've been hearing for years about, oh, the bust in the birth rate. We were talking just about, a moment ago, talking about Elon Musk and his booming birth rate, his personal booming birth rate, and that China's on the decline, unlike Elon Musk's birth rate. But that you and I have talked about this before on my previous show, is that because of the new economy in China, the industrialization, the growth of the population from abject poverty into having a functioning middle class in the late 20th century, that this is a normal part of any economy's growth process, that your birth rates will slow down, especially as more people go in for higher education, specifically women. And this is just a normal part of the thing for any country. And people keep saying the economic bust is here. Now it's here. Trump has brought that bust to China, coupled with the birth rate issue. But it seems like China has more options now, with all of the ASEAN countries, the BRICS countries, and especially with BRICS talking about kind of de-dollarizing their economies and coming up with their own currency, which I call BRICS bucks, patent pending. I think this could be actually the inverse and be very bad for the U.S. economy, especially echoing the TikTok video that you shared with me of that young Chinese man talking about how the U.S. had exported U.S. exported all the jobs over the past 30, 40 years, strengthened China's economy, and did zero investing within our own borders. How does Trump think what he's doing now? How do we reconcile that when we know that Trump, or at least I shouldn't only blame Trump, I should say all U.S. presidents have not invested within our own borders? We've sent our money, our jobs out to endless wars. We've sent our production capacity elsewhere, while China's reinvested in their own. So I don't see how China is gonna crumble like everyone is all the professionals are predicting.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, they have been predicting China's collapse since the 1990s. Every year it's a new prediction.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing you can put your bets on, is that China will not collapse. Certainly not in the way that these pundits are predicting. But let's come back to this notion of the difference in the way that the countries have developed. Let me give you an analogy. Manila, let's say that I go to a restaurant and I pay money and I get a meal. We're essentially exchanging equivalence, given that I see that what I'm getting is equivalent to what you're getting. Both parties are benefiting. This is win-win. Now, Trump doesn't believe that. He believes that the fact that I paid money to the restaurant and that the restaurant never bought anything from me means that they have ripped me off, right?
Yeah.
All those sandwiches notwithstanding.
Yeah.
But it's a little
KJ, why didn't you buy a sandwich back from Trump?
Exactly.
Yeah, why so churlish?
Right. I mean, it's a character flaw, but
I mean, trade deficits really, I never understood the first time I learned about it in school, that why is that even called a deficit? It's it's not necessarily a problem.
It's not a problem unless you subscribe to some crazy flat earth theory of economics, where you believe, and this is the mercantile theory before we had, actually real economic theory, is that what you want to have a, positive trade balance. And with that positive trade balance, you invest, or you want to accrue bullion, metals, precious metals. And that is the measure of your national strength. Well, I mean, it's a completely ridiculous theory of national wealth, because we measure national wealth or national strength through other measures, GDP among others. Simply looking at your current account balance doesn't make any sense, because trade is a positive win-win unless you subscribe to a flat earth theory of economics. But let me come back to the original analogy that I'm going to a restaurant, I'm getting food, and I'm running, a deficit with the restaurant because they're not buying anything from me. In the case of the United States, it's actually worse than that, because it's not simply that I bought food from the restaurant and they didn't buy food from me. What really happened is the restaurant was really nice and they let me run up a tab. And I actually didn't pay anything for the food. I just kept on giving them IOUs, and they were indulgent, and they, let me run up this massive tab. And after having run up this massive tab, the Trump administration is saying, look, they cheated us. We didn't pay anything for our food, but they have this huge tab on us, and therefore they have cheated us. So this is the kind of absurdity which the administration is, functioning from. Let me give you one more analogy. When people trade or when people do business, generally the concept is that unless they're external forces, coercive forces, you and I are trading equivalents. If I give you something, you will only trade with me if I'm giving you something which is equally valuable to you. So essentially, we are trading equivalents. Now, let's say Ted and I have family businesses, and through some, good coincidence of, marketing needs, he and I were doing trade for decades, doing business for decades, and we both made money. Problem is that, and this is just an analogy, Ted's kids are malnourished, and my kids seem to be doing okay. Now, is that my fault that somehow I stole the bread from your children's mouth? Or is it something to do with the fact that, the paterfamilias, squandered their money on, trivial things like cars and yachts, and actually didn't take good care of their children? Where does that blame lie? And so when the Trump administration says, American working class is doing badly, they don't have jobs, they would deindustrialize, whose fault is that? Who's responsible for that? And that's what that video is saying. In China, we benefited from this trade. It was a win-win, but we developed public infrastructure, public wealth. We gave our citizens, near universal healthcare, free education. Mm-hmm. And you in the United States, you spent all your money on yachts and cars and mansions. All of that money, which was beneficial to you, it was siphoned straight off to the top. And that's why that guy says you don't need tariffs. What you need is a revolution.
So what do you think? What do you think Donald Trump is on about here? I mean, the general, and I agree with this. I mean, most economists seem to think that whatever utility tariffs might have had in order to protect American manufacturing jobs expired somewhere during the early Reagan administration, if not earlier, because the deindustrialization horse has left the barn, right? I mean, there's no more jobs to protect anymore in the Rust Belt, and so what is the point of all this? Is Trump, in your view, or in the Asian view, is Trump just stupid and crazy? I mean, it could be that simple, or do you think this is a misunderstanding of sorts?
It's hard to say. And people have said, never underestimate people's capacity to be stupid, right? But ostensibly, if you look at it, it looks like Trump is trying to create a strong position for negotiating. Ostensibly, he says that he wants to reindustrialize the United States, and this is what everybody else around him is saying, in particular Peter Navarro. They also say that it is to generate revenue for so that taxes can be cut. I think that's definitely a real part of the equation, that Trump believes in this pre-1913 theory of economics where we didn't have any income taxes or corporate taxes. Everything came from, tariffs. But as you said,
which wasn't quite true. But yeah.
It wasn't true, and that horse has left the barn many times over. And then he also says that it's about lowering prices, which is an absurdity. But let's come back to this notion of reindustrialization. That's not going to happen, as you and I know, because deindustrialization has already been a 50-year process, if not a 70-year process. And we know that, if you have kind of an unfettered neoliberal market capitalist system, corporations tend towards monopolies. That's why Amazon is a monopoly, Microsoft is a monopoly. All of these monopolies, what they do is they do two things. One is they inshitify their products. Everything shittier and shittier, and they just gouge you more and more. And at the same time, because of their monopoly power, they impoverish and immiserate the workers. So then you get this contradiction where the working class is no longer able to buy the products that these monopoly corporations are selling. So how do the monopoly corporations deal with that? Do they, industrialize further? Do they make, cheaper prices? Of course not. Their job is to gouge. Their raison d'être is to gouge. And so what they do is they financialize. They shift to financialization. So when U.S. Workers can no longer buy GM cars, what does GM do? It creates GM finance, GM capital. And so that's the financialization. Instead of selling cars, their main job is to sell loans. Same thing with Amazon. You go onto Amazon, you'll get 5 offers, to borrow money to buy whatever it is you want to buy. You can even, if you buy that burrito, if you order that burrito now, you can go on and you can pay for your burrito in 4 easy installments, right? And so everything financializes because that's where the easy, cheap money is, because you simply gouge the working class. And given that structure and given that system, there is no way these monopoly corporations are going to reindustrialize and rebuild, the American manufacturing sector at great cost and at great risk and, unpredictability. And so that horse, not to, beat the dead horse, has left the barn many times over. And without targeted industrial policy, you are not going to see reindustrialization. But once again, let's compare China and the US. Even if the US had this massive project of reindustrialization, it is much easier for China to increase demand simply through, QE or other fiscal levers that it can pull than it is for the United States to reshore and build up its industry, even if it had a highly targeted and highly, well thought through industrial policy. So it is, I think, at the end of the day, it looks like stupidity or foolishness or madness, unless you think of it as simply a way of justifying what a deeper agenda is, which is to isolate and prepare for war against China and to shift the massive burden of taxation onto regular consumers. I think those are the two things that are really underlying all the, the PR.
Yeah.
But one thing I am a little bit skeptical, or at least I want to, inquire about, is China's assertion that they can replace foreign demand with domestic demand. If that's the case, why didn't they do that before?
I think they were in that process. So it was a 20-year process. When countries begin this process of moving up the value chain, initially you can see it with Taiwan, Korea, Japan, etc. They start out as export economies. Vietnam is on that chain right now, as are many other Southeast Asian countries. And then eventually, as they build domestic wealth, then they shift towards domestic consumption. So I think that is starting to happen. And it's a 20-year process that you can see generally transitioning deeper and deeper. So I think that will happen. And also, the other piece of it is that I think, there are, macroeconomic factors involved. Chinese have a propensity to save, and that propensity to save has to do with the fact that, retirements are not robust. But these are policy choices.
And it's cultural too, right? I mean,
yeah.
What are savings accounts like? What are the yields on savings accounts in China? Here, they're negligible. We have an anti-savings policy where you're lucky to get 1 percentage point on your savings. What's it like there?
I think we save more here, KJ, in underneath our mattress or in the couch cushions, because I tend to find coins that have fallen, and I actually make more from cleaning out the couch cushions than I do from my Chase savings account.
Definitely, yeah. So that's your 401k right there behind your, behind your couch. I don't think the interest rates are very high in China. I'd have to look that up. I don't think they're very high, but still the Chinese tend to save.
They also have that history of instability. So in the back of everyone's mind is, you never know.
Culturally, it's living below your means. That's a cultural truism through and through and through and through. And remember, we're talking about a culture that's thousands of years old.
People ask you, have you eaten? Which, of course, is a reflection of, again, like uncertainty historically. Savings comes with the territory when you live in a 5,000, 6,000-year-old culture, which has had numerous revolutions and upheavals.
It's baked in.
And I think it's been, since 1949, things have moved in a positive direction. China has not had a recession since then. It has simply, seems to have avoided the capitalist boom and bust cycle. And it has had very, very rational planning, which has simply increased wealth year after year after year. Like right now, people are saying that, 5.4% growth is a bad year. It is. I mean, generally, China has been growing 8%.
But we would love that.
We would give our eye teeth for that, right? But just one more example.
The U.S. one. Look there on the screen. The U.S. is looking more or less. We're lucky. I mean, this is from 2023. We're lucky if we're seeing 3% growth in the U.S.
Oh no, in the U.S. that's what policymakers aim for, is 3% increase in GDP. That's considered the sweet spot here.
Yeah. I mean, these are their numbers here, and China's.
If you had 4%, the U.S. economy would be considered overheated, and they'd be concerned about inflation.
Yeah. China in 1980, its per capita GDP was the same as Haiti's. Okay. Now it's nothing like Haiti. The working class, their salaries have increased. Manufacturing salaries have increased 130-fold since then. They have the world's largest middle class right now. They've, ended poverty or extreme poverty. So there's a way in which things are moving in the right direction. They have the greatest confidence of any, they have the greatest support of any government on the planet, according to American pollsters, somewhere in the 80s to 90s. So they seem to be doing something well. But on the other hand, we are, it looks like our administration is that proverbial monkey with a straight razor. And so, I think that these predictions that the U.S. is going to have a recession are probably very prescient. We see this kind of now this, conflict, with, inside the ruling elite themselves. They're telling Trump to pull back on these tariffs. And of course, let's think about this. Trump has stayed the tariffs for 90 days. We're right now, 85, 84 days. So if he wants to renegotiate those tariffs with 190 plus countries, he's going to have to negotiate 2.5 contracts every single day. Otherwise, that extension will have to be extended. And Ted, you seem to be, your mic seems to be off. Yes.
No. That's the penguins are going to be easy to negotiate with in the Marshall Islands.
they're going to be very easy to negotiate. They'll be a pushover, they'll just step
Yeah.
on the ice and that'll be.
Penguins have that attitude. Yeah, they're easy.
Yes. But the problem is this kind of whipsawing position, right? First, you have the tariffs, then you have this 90-day extension, except for China, upon which, China has 145% tariffs. In the White House website, they say in some cases it's as high as 245% tariff. Okay. Now, once you get above 50%, you're not making any sense. It's like those AOL discs that offer you, 500, 1,000, 1,500 hours. It just doesn't make any sense beyond a certain point.
I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, Trump says that he's going to exempt electronics from tariffs, right? Now, electronics are the key thing that China exports to the United States. So by exempting that, you're saying that you're not going to reindustrialize electronics manufacture. What message are you sending? The key message you're sending is that you don't know what you're doing and that you're weak. And so this kind of whipsawing back and forth. And it's like, playing chess. You put down your pieces and then you take back your move. And you put down your pieces and you take back your move. And the only thing you're signaling is that you don't know what you're doing. It means that you are a complete idiot in this game. And in the meantime, this fibrillation is actually giving the US plutocratic class a heart attack. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to invest, what to do, what's coming next. And it's that complete loss of confidence, which is completely and totally damaging to the global economy in general. The Chinese have said it, and I think they said it well. They said this violates international trade rules. It violates the basic rules of economics. It violates common sense, and it is unilateral bullying.
Yeah, and KJ, while we're on the subject of electronics, during the Biden era and Trump era 1.0, we heard a lot from the Democrats about Taiwan. Taipei is our chip manufacturer of the world, and blah blah blah. And we must protect Taipei. We must protect Taiwan. We're not hearing much about that in Trump 2.0. In fact, Trump is talking about, trying to make chips here, microchips here in the US, which to me could be a signal that he's kind of doesn't care about Taiwan, which has a lot of people, especially, in the Nancy Pelosi fold, up in arms about that. Where's your protection to Taiwan? Do you see that as sort of a Trump kind of decoupling from Taiwan as well, especially as he's trying to force American companies to produce chips here domestically?
I think there are opposing forces happening, because I think there are definitely a group of neocons that want to escalate to war against China, and they want to strengthen and consolidate their force projection capacity with Taiwan, with Japan, with Korea. And so there is that trend, and you can see it with Pete Hegseth and other neocons. And on the other hand, we know that Donald Trump is incredibly transactionalist. He wants to be paid for, whatever he's doing. And it looks like he's trying to force these countries, certainly Japan and Korea, to renegotiate, quote unquote, their burden sharing. Burden sharing is when these countries pay for the privilege of being militarily occupied. So, South Korea pays about 1.2 billion. Trump wants to raise it to about 10 billion. Japan pays, I think, somewhere in the range about 5 billion. Again, Trump wants to, double that. He wants these countries to pay tribute, as, Miran is, one of his, economic advisors has said. He wants them to pay tribute to the United States. And Taiwan, had banked on it being this kind of favored child, this like school teacher's pet in the US, kind of geopolitical arena. But during the Biden administration, they arm twisted TSMC and said, you need to start building a plant in the United States. And they did. They invested tens of $billions. They started building this plant in Arizona. It's having a lot of problems because, as we said, industrial policy is not easy. And that has to do, among other things, with building the educational infrastructure. You need to have educated people who can do this kind of advanced manufacturing work, industrial engineers, etc. And then you can hire them and train them, etc. They can do that. That work is not going easily. It's not going well. And what has happened is that TSMC has actually had to import thousands of industrial engineers from Taiwan and have them settle in Arizona. So much for those well-paid jobs that are going to, help Americans. No, it's just been a massive, blowout on that domain. And the unions are complaining. They're saying that that they're being discriminated against, etc., because they don't like. I mean, TSMC is brutal. I mean, they have a very military culture in the way that they run their factories, and of course, U.S. unions are not going to stand for that. And so there's been a lot of conflict. So how well that will go remains to be seen. But that is the ostensible plan. Remember, during the Biden administration, the plans were floated that if China tried, quote unquote, to take Taiwan by force, the U.S. would blow up TSMC's factories on Taiwan Island. So much for protecting Taiwan. Essentially, they are a pawn, and like any pawn, a pawn is expendable. And I think the people of Taiwan understand that, but it remains to be seen whether the DPP, the quisling U.S. influence leadership, understands that. That remains to be seen. Just one more piece. The vice president of Taiwan, Louise Chow, is a Jersey girl. She is a former American citizen. She grew up in New Jersey.
Oh.
Yes, she went to expensive, schools in, New Jersey, bedroom suburbs, and she lived in New York. She's essentially an American who was temporarily relieved herself of her American garments so that she could be the handler of American affairs inside the Taiwan government. The thing is that she refers to herself as a cat warrior because she has something like 9 cats or something. And
so she's not all bad.
She's not all bad. She loves cats. But, this is the kind of leader. I mean, she was a darling in the neocon circles under the Biden administration, but it's not the kind of leader that Trump or, Vice President Vance gets along well with. So there's going to be, I anticipate, interpersonal conflict, just as there was with Zelensky.
Interesting tidbit. I did not know that about her. That makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, I feel like this is not going down any good path for the United States, KJ. And to your earlier point that, if we're going to live in a capitalist society, obviously the big companies, over the course of in the 80s and 90s, offshored all of these jobs that brought America into a solid middle class to begin with, and basically gave China their middle class, which is why after the early 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, that's when we started seeing a slow rise of China, and then of course after joining the WTO in the early 2000s, it was, our fate was sealed here in the US at that point, because that's when everything started offshoring. We saw NAFTA, we saw everything, every which way that the middle class could get cut here in the US, it was given to other countries. Our middle class was effectively given away, and the Chinese just reinvested in, like your very earlier analogy. Such a good point is that it's, it's not China's fault that they fed their own, and our oligarchs and plutocrats and, they didn't feed us and our political elites.
And conversely, the assumption there when we did the outsourcing was that China, it would work for us because the Chinese workers would remain poor and downtrodden and would therefore be willing to work for low wages. It was assumed that they would remain like vulnerable, right, and that they didn't anticipate that
Well,
the Chinese would have a completely different view, and they would
it's
and they would
American
and they would build
projection.
them up, you know?
It's American projection, I would say, by
Totally.
the political elites here, is because that's how they would behave. So they assumed the Chinese
Correct.
political class would behave that way as well, and they didn't.
No. Surprise. Yeah.
Surprise, as they say, surprise, bitches. And that's exactly what happened. And now, you know, I would say with the China raising all of its own boats, it is now doing the same thing across other ASEAN countries, like they're doing in Laos right now with the high-speed rail. Laos was a neglected third world little country that the U.S. bombed the shit out of during the Vietnam War
shits
secretly,
about it all,
and gave no shit about it. And now that China is securely, you know, debatably in the first or second position economically, is now, you know, giving a helping hand to surrounding poorer countries like Laos, showing them development, showing them, you know, and the U.S., when we have been in that position for the bulk of the 20th century, we didn't actually do that. We didn't give a helping hand to our neighbors, KJ.
Could you imagine the position? The U.S. would be a completely untouchable global hegemon if it had done that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just coming back to Laos for just one instant. I mean, it is the most bombed country on the planet. It's a small country, small agrarian country. It was bombed to smithereens. You know, according to some statistics, you know, the U.S. dropped a ton of bombs every 8 minutes, you know, for 10 years. Just incredible. And there's so much unexploded ordnance inside of Laos itself right now that you can draw a 1-to-1 correlation between poverty and UXO. If you look at a map, that is, you know, you have unexploded ordnance, you know, the father goes out to work, then gets his limbs blown off, and the family, you know, is put into poverty, and the 8-year-old child.
That's how my grandfather died, my dad's dad.
Yeah.
From unexploded ordnance. So I know within, you know, very close range of my lineage of how that happened, and that's also how they wound up here in the U.S. But that said, the U.S. never went back to clean up its mess. So the surprise.
You're so funny, Manila.
And
you're a funny lady.
Unsurprisingly, the only countries that are helping Laos at all was China and Russia.
Yeah, but that's perceived by the West as like they're cheating somehow. You're not allowed to do that. That's like you're
not allowed to help them.
You're buying influence. It's like, yeah, you should try it. Try it.
Yeah. The Russians are building a big airport hangar at the Vientiane airport, the capital city airport. And in trade-off or in deficit, I don't know how, since we're talking about this, is that the agreement is that the Lao government would allow the Russians to park some of their jets there, their fighter jets.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese are building railroads and schools and hospitals. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. government last year, or maybe it was under the Obama administration, gave $50 million.
$50 million.
Million.
Which is, by the way, as pathetic as it is an improvement over what they got in the past.
They're like, here's $50 million. Try to clean some of that mess up. And you're like, wait a minute, 50 years of being pushed into poverty, and you're giving us 50 million funny American dollars. Like, that's what I just feel like that's such insult to injury. But you know, that's a whole different conversation.
Which due to Trump's killing the value of the dollar is now worth $40 billion.
So a lot to talk about in Asia, and we always appreciate you hanging out and sharing your expert insight with us, KJ. I found some of your latest stuff posted at sheerpost.com, so I'm going to put that up there as well. So we appreciate it if you can go take a look at KJ's work there. You just look up KJ Noh's name, and you'll find a litany of places where you can read everything KJ has published, and be better for it, because you'll learn a thing or two.
True.
And I'm also hosting a show on the Breakthrough News Network called Yeah.
Tell us
So
the name again.
it's called the China Report on the Breakthrough News Network on YouTube.
Nice.
Excellent. I've got to go look into that. I haven't seen that yet. So a lot of stuff moving on your side. Thank you so much for making time for us, KJ. I appreciate it. It's good to see you. I hope you'll be back again soon. So much to talk about in Asia.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure to be with you.
Thanks,
Thank
KJ.
you, KJ. Always great talking to KJ.
Totally.
So that does it for our Friday, our Good Friday, Holy Friday episode.
Holy Friday.
Very, very holy. So is there an ad to do?
I don't believe so. I'll take a quick look. Hold on.
Take a squid. Ted,
Yeah.
that my old editor used to say that. He was
What?
a bogan Aussie.
Really?
Yeah. Crazy old bogan Aussie. Take a squiz, darling. That's what he would tell me.
Yeah, we got something. Here, I'm going to do it right now.
Ooh, we do. Let's roll it.
Okay, now I have to make sure I do this right because, okay,
you gotta
all
click
right,
it
did
and-
that. Here we go. All right, week coffees for the week, and at Rumble, week has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, and no settling for mediocrity, just like 1775 coffee. It's single origin, small farm, hand-picked, specialty grade coffee that stands for quality, free speech, and calling out BS where it matters, when it matters. Forget stale, mass-produced beans roasted just enough to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness and vitality. Mushroom blend, real energy and lasting focus, no synthetic garbage. For K-Cup pods, whole bean, or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775coffee.com. Use code STUDIO for 15% off and start your morning with coffee that stands for something. Oh, and every dollar spent enters you to win a Cybertruck and $30,000 cash. All right, there we go. Done.
Can I just have the cash value of the Cybertruck plus the $30,000?
Well, you're also going to probably need a gun to fend off the
Well,
people trying to vandalize your
not want-
Cybertruck.
I would not want that thing. I'm sorry to all those who have one, but I just think they're ugly as sin. They're just unholy.
I haven't really done a dive into the utility aspect of it.
But you've seen it,
how
right?
useful.
You've seen
Yeah, I've
what-
seen them. People have them
Uh-huh.
on the streets in New York.
I think
But I
they're
haven't,
ugly.
driven one. I haven't been inside. I haven't seen. I know that has something
Yeah.
like it's apparently people. It's got a utility aspect, right? So
Yeah,
I don't know.
it is. Our faces have seemed to disappear off of Rumble,
weird.
and the Rumble room says it only shows the ad pop up. So
Oh.
we're still learning this. When we don't have producer Robbie, this is what happens.
Oh my God! Let me see if I can fix that. But we probably should just go.
Well, we should, but we should figure it out in real time. So that
All
way
right,
we
all right.
won't
Let's
do this
figure it
again
out
in the
right
future.
now. What's going
So
on?
the Rumble room says they can hear us, but our faces are gone, and it was just the
Oh
coffee
my God!
pop up.
Presentation.
So we
Okay,
need to.
there we
need to
go. I
figure it
think.
out. So when
I
we
think
don't have
that.
Robbie,
How's that? That should be good.
I don't know.
No, I think they're seeing us now.
Are we back up? We're back up.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know what happens. Yeah, we're gonna need a tutorial from producer Robbie here because the days we don't have producer Robbie, stuff like this happens. But anyway,
Mhm.
it adds to the Friday fun.
All right. Happy Holy
That's it.
Friday.
Happy Holy Friday. Good
Jesus,
Friday
hang in
to
there.
you.
Only 2 more days. 3, depending on how you count.
Well, no, Ted, he doesn't resurrect again. That's
What
not.
do you mean? I mean, but he's got to hang in there. He's going to be dead for a few days.
Yeah, I know, but it only happened the one time. He's already risen.
No, not now. He dies today at like 3:00 in the afternoon, local time. Well, he died.
I'm saying-
He died in
I'm saying
Jerusalem, so he's already dead. You're
physically.
right. Good point.
Physically, he's
Yeah.
already risen. You know,
By the way, I can't believe he has to do
2000
this shit every year.
25. Is that what the thing is though? Is he does it every year?
No,
I think it was
it's just it's an anniversary thing.
Yeah, it's an anniversary, right? They don't like nobody. I was like, I missed that in catechism if they said that he's supposed to rise
It's
every
like
year.
Groundhog Day for Jesus.
Like he has to re-die every year. Like that's
It's
not
like
right.
yeah, it's like that terrible Korean movie that came out
Oh,
with the guy who dies. It's like Groundhog Day. It's like Day After
yeah, I
Tomorrow.
forget.
The
Oh,
guy dies all the time.
I know what
It's
you're
terrible.
talking
Yeah, the guy who did
Yeah.
Parasite. Yeah.
Yes. I thought it was going to be good because he did Parasite. And then it
Yeah.
was like,
Parasite's a little overrated. Just saying.
I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought it was good. But Trump was pissed that won Best Picture because it should be an American film.
Well, I think honestly he's right. I don't think that.
You think?
It's like the Oscars isn't supposed to be like they have a category for Best Foreign Film. And that's what it should be for. I mean, it's the Oscars. I mean, it's kind of like
true.
If you're competing, just think about it. If you're like an American actor, director, whatever, key grip, you walk into, the Oscars and it's like, oh, now I'm competing against people from like, Vanuatu. Like, why?
Right.
It's ridiculous.
A film made in Australia. Like, wait a minute.
No, that's not right.
Oh, that's true. I guess you have a point. Yeah. They do have a Best Foreign Film. Yeah.
It's sort of like in the Pulitzers, they changed it so that all of us editorial cartoonists are now also competing for the Pulitzer against all the gag cartoonists, the New Yorker cartoonists, the comic strip people, graphic novelists, everyone else.
Wow.
Everybody who draws comic type stuff. And it's like, well, we're like
anybody who draws.
Bye.
Oh.
It's just not possible. Your chances. You always had long odds of winning, but like now it's like forget it.
Oh, I see. I'm just used to automatically saying Trump is wrong about stuff. So when he's wrong,
that's
I
fair.
was like, he's wrong about Parasite, and but I forgot that they have Best Foreign Film, and yeah, that's where Parasite should have gone if it was going to win.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And I don't even think it was the best. I don't think it was the best foreign film of that year anyway. But anyway.
I don't remember. Anyway, that does it. I have films to watch then this weekend if I find any time.
What are you going to watch?
I don't know.
May I make a recommendation?
Well, because the Oscars did they just happen?
May I recommend The Companion, my favorite film I've seen in a long time.
Who's in it?
Let me look that up. It's like a nobody cast, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's not really. So
it was an Oscar film, right?
It's a brand new film. A weekend getaway with friends at a remote cabin turns into chaos after it's revealed that one of the guests is not what they seem. Director Drew Hancock. It stars Sophie Thatcher, Jack Quaid, and Lucas Gage.
I've heard of it.
Do you know who Sophie Thatcher is?
No.
She's best known for being in the TV show Yellow Jackets. She made her screen debut in the sci-fi movie Prospect. And Lucas, like I told you, Lucas Gage was in White Lotus. He was in White Lotus in season 1. Probably the best way to know him. And then Jack Quaid, who I believe is a Quaid, he was in. He had a minor role in Hunger Games, and he was in The Boys. That show.
I don't watch any of those things, so I will look into your recommendation for this weekend because I deserve 90 minutes to just loaf. Absolutely,
yeah, of course you do. You're American.
I want to just loaf and not be constantly productive. So there, guys, enjoy your Easter weekend and loaf and watch some films and have some resurrecting celebrations.
Yeah. Like I said, Jesus, hang on. It's going to suck. Well, it's going to suck, and then it won't suck.
Resurrection Day.
And then you get to freak people out, like I'm not. You know how he did, right? Like how he
I'm
walked
not
around.
where you left me.
Yeah. Oh, you thought I was dead, right? Bitches, I'm back.
You thought I was in that cave?
Mm-mm.
You thought that's where you left me?
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Beam me up, Scotty.
And then I'm going to be pissed. We go and get even. Like I'm finding Pontius Pilate.
What an asshole!
I want to see the Tarantino version. Jesus, the Revenge.
Oh man, that
Jesus 2.
The Revenge Tour.
Yeah. I had the idea for the most tasteless film of all time, which was The Diary of Anne Frank 2. Like, there's no evidence. We don't know that she died for sure. It's not documented. That's true.
Right. Well, there was also.
So, like, what if she came back
and
she's like goes after the asshole neighbor who turned her in, like.
I would watch. It would become like a cult classic B film.
The Diary of Anne Frank 2, The Revenge.
The Revenge. Anne
Yeah.
Frank, The Revenge.
Yeah. She's not. I'm not your little Dutch girl anymore.
Bitch.
That's right.
You end all revenge lines with bitch, Ted.
That's right.
Comma, bitch.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah. You write it all, and then you cut and paste the bitch in at the end.
You just
every line.
bitch. Anyway,
All right.
have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you
Bye, Manila. Bye, everyone.
Monday. Yes. Have a good weekend, Ted.
Monday.
Adios, amigos.
Bye.
Bye.